Welcome to the Creating Your Conditions podcast, a work of understanding the conditions we are given, the conditions we create, and the conditions we have yet to achieve. You can find us at Creating Your Conditions on Instagram. My name is Vin. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I am your host. In today's episode, I am interviewing Zeke Peyton, he, him pronouns. Zeke is an experienced brewer and winemaker with a kinesiology degree. He's a current entrepreneur looking to create some balance in life. He's an East Coast native living out west. He loves the outdoors, fermentation, and cooking. Welcome to the podcast, Zeke.
For having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Um, awesome. So Zeke, let's start us off with the conditions you were given, the uncontrollables, right? That can range from like your ethnic background, your childhood, basically trying to get to maybe the age of 18. So why don't you
hmm
start us off there?
Sure. Yeah. So you kind of mentioned I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Um, I am half black, half white. So my dad's black, my mom's white, which has factored a lot more into my life than I'd like it to. That's kind of inevitable and things like that. Um, grew up in the suburbs, pretty suburban, straightforward life. I think one of the big formative things growing up for me, I lived in a neighborhood that was surrounded on three sides by a nature conservancy that's run by the State Park Service in Maryland. So basically lived in a park, which is probably why I love spending so much time outside now. It's kind of a big prerequisite for my life. Um, yeah, so pretty normal upbringing. I studied Japanese in middle school, which was an interesting thing. It was a cool experience. So I got to have like a pretty deep immersion into a different culture from a fairly young age through middle school and high school. Um, Graduated high school, I went to the University of Maryland. Like I said, I have a kinesiology degree. And then as soon as I got that, I immediately moved to California and started working on becoming a brewer. Uh, Mostly just used my degree for personal things at this point. It's a very interesting journey. Uh, I don't know if it was very necessary, aside from the fact that my parents said, "You are doing this." Uh, I don't know if there would have been like another option. College was like, it was like that suburban upbringing. Like, you're going to college. That's the bottom line. I didn't pay for it, which was great of them, but it was absolutely like, you have to go. So I went, I did it. I think it was cool to at least have that in my back pocket to say that like I can finish a very long term project. Uh, I wouldn't even say that like my degree is the biggest thing I got out of being in college. Um, I try to in life kind of think about the advantages that you have and like what the actual situation is trying to teach you. And yes, I did learn a lot with my degree. I actually kind of changed my path a couple of times from business to kinesiology, and then to kind of like, okay, I have to finish my degree and then do my prerequisites if I wanted to go to brewing school. We're taking some extra science in that. But I worked for the football team at University of Maryland. I was on the equipment staff, and that was a big kind of formative thing for me. As far as work ethic goes, as far as just dealing with things, being uncomfortable, seeing what it is to like put in the work and work to achieve something. And I think that's honestly like the biggest thing I took from my experience in Maryland and brought out west.
Okay, okay. All right, let's go back a little bit. We went into college and it's good stuff though. You talked about I didn't or maybe I forgot. I'm sure you've told me that you grew up in like surrounded by the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah.
Um like that's pretty big because anytime I've hung out with you, you're like, I need to take you to trees or we're going to the woods. Like those are the bases of our hangouts, like when we lived together and then when I visited you earlier this summer. Um so like were your parents also into the outdoors? Is that why it was
Not
also encouraged?
particularly. Uh,
Okay.
my dad, especially, he grew up in the inner city in Baltimore. Uh, which is very different from where I did. I don't know if I've ever seen him in the woods ever in our whole time together here. My mom liked to. There was a like a paved path through the woods that would go to kind of the town next door. And so we would go down there and like walk down there. I went hiking with my mom a few times when I was young, but most of that was pretty much limited to like Cub Scouts when I was doing that. So yeah, I have seen my dad in the woods. He took me to Cub Scouts camp. Uh,
Oh, you're a Cub Scout.
I was a
Cute.
Cub Scout. Got to Webelos one, and then I decided I wanted to play soccer instead. Um, yeah, my parents weren't super into that, but that was what we did growing up. You know, I was kind of where we had to go and play and explore, and probably from like 7 or 8 on, I was just allowed to go into the woods with my friends, uh, which is
Oh, by
interesting.
yourself, like without adult supervision.
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool.
I'm not sure many kids these days would be allowed to like have that freedom. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, we roam all over the woods, find all kinds of whatever's back there. That land belonged to a man named Benjamin Banneker. He was like the first black mathematician in the country. So on the other side, there's like a little museum for him with like, old like house for all that was. So that's a big part of like the conservancy. There's like old shacks back there. Like I said, it goes down to the town next door, Ellicott City, where the B&O Railroad goes through. So there's a lot of like old stuff related to the railroad, quarries, like old equipment just in the woods. There's a lot of just random stuff in the woods around where I grew up. So we just spent a lot of time like that was the fun thing to do was to go explore. Our parents didn't really want us walking like up the road into town, so it was like you can go in the woods or you can stay here. So the woods was it.
Yeah. Like they didn't want you going into roads where like cars were and stuff, probably, right?
Yeah, yeah. We wanted to walk to 7-Eleven, and they were really not having that, which is fair because there's nothing but trouble at that 7-Eleven.
You know, those slushies will get you.
They sure will.
Um, that's really cool, actually. Yeah, my parents did not let me do that when I was growing up. Like, you guys stay home. You're not allowed to leave the house. And I was already like 14 when I was trying to negotiate, and then I was lying to them that I was not leaving the house, but I was. Um, so it's just 8 years old, just being allowed to go into the woods. At least they knew that like the worst that can happen, you might get an injury, but like probably no one's gonna take you over there.
Yeah, I mean it's a fairly like safe area, or at least it was when I was growing up. I don't know how it is now.
Mm,
People like tell you things. I think it's still a fairly safe place.
yeah.
Catonsville is known as being a very like nice suburban place to raise kids.
Okay. Cool. Tell me about this, the Japanese you took, like how you, so your school just had this program for whatever random reason, some
I
place
know.
in Maryland.
I went to a magnet school in middle school. So it
Okay.
kind of goes along with the like college was absolutely happening. There was like
Ah,
zero chance in hell I was going to the public middle school that was near my house. My mom was not
okay.
about to allow that. It was the magnet school or Catholic school. Uh, I was not about to go to Catholic school. That was a no go. And I really liked I loved anime growing up. I still love
Yeah.
anime. So I loved anime. I liked Japan, so that was an opportunity to explore something like that. So when we were talking about it, it was kind of either that or like the math and science magnet. And Japanese
You
was
went for the
wait,
cultural one.
yeah, it was easier to get into, and I thought it'd be more fun. And I'm also not a math person. Like I like
Same.
the fact that I can think back to my second grade teacher telling me I'm not going to have a calculator in my pocket and think, ha, I have a supercomputer in my pocket. Math is not for me. So it was a really cool experience. You know, I think a lot of kids in middle school have shorter classes, and then when you get to high, kind of like elementary school, so you might have like 6 classes a day. And when you get to high school, a lot of times it transitions to like 4. But when I was in
Mm-hmm.
middle school, it was 4 classes a day, so it was still that 90-minute 4 class block. And we took 90 minutes of your magnet every single day, all 3 years. So I had 90 minutes of instruction in Japanese both semesters
Wow.
for the first 3 years. And then in the county, because that school existed, and it wasn't public school, it was just a magnet school, so you had to apply. Uh, Basically, it was like a higher achieving academic school that they put in a bad district to make the numbers look better. Um,
They're the
but
curve.
yeah, exactly. Um, so there were two high schools that offered Japanese because that school existed. One of them just happened to be the high school in my hometown, so it was my natural high school anyway. So it was a pretty natural thing to just continue doing that. And again, it was something I was really interested in when I was in seventh grade. All through middle school, we had native speaking teaching assistants. One of them,
Oh,
yeah, so they did homestays, and one of them lived with us when I was in seventh grade. So she's just kind of like part of the family. Uh, Last time I was in Europe in 2018, they were in Europe for a while. I went to like stay with her and her family in Paris for a few days. I know mom's gone to Japan to visit them, and when they were in Belgium, she went to visit. They're very much like
wow.
another
Still
extended
connected to your
family.
family. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I think it's hard
How,
not to be when you spend like that much time with somebody. You know, like she just
yeah,
lived with us for a year, so you end up getting like very close.
yeah, that's rad. That's a really big opportunity to exchange and like understand other people too.
Yeah.
It's cool. Why were your parents so adamant about you not going to the public school and wanted you to pick either magnet or Catholic school?
Um, I think my mom was just convinced that there was nothing good going on at that public school. Uh, she was under the impression it was a very troubled place.
Hmm.
Did not want me going to school there. So that was just kind of that.
Okay.
Whether or not that's true, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really, I was 11, so I had no real thoughts in depth on the quality Catonsville Middle School.
Yeah.
Nor do I know anything about Catonsville Middle School now. If it's anything involving school districts, I'm much more interested in like the school district where my child is than the one I grew up in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then why did you know you weren't gonna do Catholic school? I'm guessing your family didn't raise y'all religious, or were you?
No, um, my dad, like maybe he was religious some, but I never knew anything of him going to church.
Okay.
My mom did not go to church. I went to church for a little while, from like when I was 7 to like maybe when I was 13. But the last couple of years of that were like very much in protest. Once I started going, they got me with like the summer kickball. Sunday school in the summers, they would do like kickball and activities instead of Sunday school. And they kind of got
Yeah.
me with that, and that's kind of fun. I wanted to go. And then really as I like got along in through that, I did not want to go anymore. And it wasn't a Catholic church. It was non-denominational. They're like kind of a mega church now. It's
Oof.
really weird. It's like where did all this money come from? This is bizarre. Uh,
It's that it's untaxed, so it
yeah,
just accumulates without, taxes.
that's fair. But so I didn't really like. I didn't love the church in the first place.
Hmm.
I did not want to wear the Catholic school uniform. I didn't want the strict schooling or the religious education. And I kind of started to kind of get a little turned off of that by the church that I went to. They were kind of very, they would like push this notion that you can't have a relationship with God unless you go to church. Uh, I'm
Ah,
not a religious human. I tend to feel like, philosophically speaking, one thing has always existed. You can't make something from nothing. So that's the creator or the universe. And if it's the creator couldn't have made the universe from anything but the creator. So the universe and the creator are really the same thing. And we are also all that. Uh,
hmm.
so, like, how can you tell me I can't have a relationship with this thing that I'm inherently part of without going to hear your interpretation of a book that a bunch of dudes wrote a couple thousand years ago? That, to me, I'm pretty sure is outlined as heresy in said book. But what do I know? Um, but so like I kind of like came home and like proudly kind of asked my mom about that. And she was like, "Well, let me just like think about that because they're saying that their interpretation of they talk about the Bible and their interpretation is now more important than your interpretation of it and your actual reading of the words and your relationship with God. Like that's kind of the opposite of what the Bible said, isn't it?" It's like, huh, okay. And then that kind of planted the seed. Then I didn't want to go, and she was like, "Yeah, but it has the structure and the moral lessons. So you're gonna keep going to church." And I managed to like squirm my way out of it by like 13.
Okay, okay. I kind of hear the younger Zeke and like your early argumentative, like making your own opinions and not getting swayed by like institutions or even like your mom trying to convince you or trying to put you in trying to encourage you to find structure, I guess, And you're like, well, how about no?
Well, I was raised by two lawyers, so there is that.
Okay. I don't know if you had told me that. That's
They're
that
both
makes a
they're
lot
both
of
lawyers.
sense.
Yep, public defender, and Dad did a whole bunch of stuff. His last job was counsel for EPA. He was like assistant state's attorney when I was younger in Baltimore City. So just that argumentative side on both sides of the family. My family is also inherently stubborn. Uh, my mom likes to joke that we were genetically correct. My grandfather owned a construction company. He was no lawyer whatsoever, but he was very stubborn. Uh, we're just kind of all that way.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. This explains this explains things. This makes sense. This makes sense of things that doesn't necessarily explain everything, but
Yeah,
yeah.
that tracks.
So on brand. Um, okay, cool. So then let's see. You kind of mentioned you're mixed race and so you said that it's not something or it has affected your life more than you'd like it to.
Yeah,
Do you have like any memories of that in your youth, like before adulthood?
yeah. One sticks out. So my mom got married when I was 8 to a man from Texas, and when his father passed away, we went down and we went to the funeral, which was just side note on that. It's in a small town in East Texas called San Augustine. It's in the Parker family cemetery, which is Bonnie Parker's family, like Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie's not there, but that's the family. So like it
Wow.
was his dad's. It was like the other side of his dad's family. I think was related to her or something, which is kind of funny. But I digress. So we get to town or whatever, and my aunt calls the funeral home to get some details. And the first thing the woman said was like, "Are you looking for the white funeral home or the black funeral home?" And this was 1998. This is not the 40s. This is not the 50s. This was the late 90s. Uh,
And how old were you?
8 years old.
Eight. You were eight. Okay. Right
Yeah,
when they got married. Okay.
yeah, yeah. His dad passed away shortly after that. Uh,
Got you.
it might have been 99. But I'm pretty sure it was something. But this is a place where it's a small town. It's East Texas. It's very southern. I don't think that really excuses it. It's definitely like there's two sides of the track kind of town. Uh, but it's hard to keep that out of your mind when you're that young. You're like, okay, well, like I don't really belong in this place, but I have to go. Like I can't not go. I need to go, but I'm not supposed to be here. Uh, and especially when it's like my race is very normal to me. Uh, I think for everyone, like your situation is just normal. I have a lot of friends who have had their parents get divorced. I'm the worst person in the world to talk to about that. My parents were never married. I don't know anything about it. Like I can say like life will be normal at some point, but I'm not good at advice for that because I don't understand the situation. So to then be in a situation, and especially when you're young and you're taught that like, you know, it's okay to be black and like this is all normal, like we're all the same. That's kind of like I think it was a big focus of my childhood upbringing. Uh, so then to be in this situation where like it's the complete opposite of that is something that's very hard to like actually wrap your head around. Uh, and it has this kind of effect of like saying, okay, well, one side of you is one thing and one side of you is the other thing. And society does kind of tend to like want to put you in a box. You know,
Oh
it's either
yeah.
like I'm more black or I'm more white. It doesn't really work that way. Like I'm both. Uh, you don't get to like take one away.
Yeah, you're
But having
100%
that,
both all the time, but
yeah,
then you get placed into these situations where you're like, okay, choose.
yeah. And so when you're in that situation, like I can be quite all I want. My skin is like an olive complexion, like I'm just kind of tan. It's very ambiguous. Uh, all people that are racist in that situation see is like a brown kid. It does nothing else really matters. So no matter how you feel, like you're just placed in this box of like whatever it is not okay here. Uh, and I think like that's my interactions with the police and all sorts of things. Like it played out at work. There's all kinds of stuff. Like it's something that comes up unfortunately too often. Uh, but once you start to like as an adult get your head around it, it makes a lot of sense to the world.
Yeah. Damn, 8 years old, and you're like, okay, gotta put this in a box now and put myself in a box.
Yeah, and it was a real weird day. Uh, and it's I don't think I really thought about it being as weird as it was for a long time. Uh, it's one of those things you like think back on and you're like, oh, all right, well that was messed up. Okay, well now I'm even more uncomfortable about it.
Yeah. Yeah, can relate. Can relate.
Yeah,
Um, Thanks for sharing that.
yeah.
Um, so then we can move into college era Zeke. Um, and so you stayed local, stayed in Maryland for that time period,
Yeah.
and you kind of learned about hmm, like work ethic within that sports team, I think you said.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was your position that you happened to be in there?
I was on the equipment staff. Um,
Okay.
so for pretty much all college teams, I can't imagine any with the professional equipment staff. It's just a student volunteer staff. I had an athletic scholarship. Technically, I am a varsity letter wearer at the University of Maryland, which is hilarious.
Technically.
Technically, yeah, I have like a Maryland varsity jacket and everything,
Yeah.
just for my service with the football team. I work with the defensive line uh, as my like position group. But
Okay.
so we set up practice, we maintained all the equipment, packed and unloaded the truck for away games, that kind of stuff. We travel to the games, work game day, run scrimmages, all that kind of stuff.
Is that where you did you like football before that? Because I know you're a big football person now, but
I wasn't really huge on football when I was in high school, but I was excited about having that when I got to University of Maryland. It's kind of cool just having like a 54,000 seat stadium sitting right in the middle of campus, and you get free tickets to go. So my freshman year, I was in the stands. I didn't do that job my first year. I was at Maryland for 5 years, so I did it for the last four. And then that was really kind of where I started to fall in love with football. Was going through the games and really starting to enjoy that. And that's where that was where the pivot to kinesiology came in. Uh, I thought it might be more fun to like work on or around a coaching staff and athletics. Uh, so being like going to kinesiology would be a good way to do that. And instead of jumping into the athletic trainer side of things.
Hmm.
I kind of wanted to have a position where it wasn't necessarily exactly what I wanted to do, where I could just show up, do a job, take a step back, and kind of look at how this worked as a whole.
Okay, I got you. I got you. Um, so then after college is when you decided to move, right?
Yeah.
And how did that decision come about?
Um, so I was doing football, and somewhere in there I started home brewing. I had a really long day home brewing. And I kind of hit the point where I was like, okay, I don't think athletics, like working in this, is for me. It's really more of a lifestyle than a job. And especially during the season, it
Ah,
takes up your entire life. There's really not a whole lot of room for anything else. That the dedication has to be there, the work has to be there.
to the
The
sport
way it
and
does, yeah,
yeah.
the way it does for a lot of things. If you really do want to be successful, you do have to put in a lot of work. Um, and I realized that like this is not what I want to do that for. Um, but after this like 12-hour day of brewing and bottling, like this not so bad. It's going to take up the entire day. I could do this. Um, so there were a couple of reasons that I moved out west. One of them was that at the time, this was 2013, there were more breweries in the city of San Diego than there were in the state of Maryland, BC, probably like Virginia and Delaware combined. There was over 50 or 60 breweries in San Diego at that time. Uh, and so it really was just a place with a great reputation for beer, uh, with some really big brands. A lot of
Yeah.
them have kind of like gone under now, like Stone's in San Diego, Pizza Port, Ballast Point, places like that. So I had a lot of big names and a lot of beer that like was on the East Coast, so you see that. So I wanted to be involved in that. And the other side of that was my sister lived in San Diego, and she had just had my oldest niece. So I wanted to try and uh, be around for her growing up, and then the rest of the kids as they came. Uh, and then there was also the hope that, like, if I moved to the same place as my sister, our dad would slow down and stop being so ridiculous. He was very sick at that point in time. Uh, not, and we didn't, I don't think we really understood how sick he was, but he was definitely hitting a point where, like, the traveling he was doing was not super sustainable, and the way that he was living wasn't super sustainable, and something was just off. So I thought maybe if we're just in one place, we'll just come here and do this. He never did, but I thought maybe.
Hmm. Do you just have that one sister?
Yeah,
Okay, got you. Is
yeah.
she still in San Diego?
She is, yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Hmm.
We're half siblings, so we share a dad. But we grew up in different houses.
Yeah. Okay. So then you come to San Diego and you're doing the beer stuff, which is when around the, well, I met you somewhere near the end of that chapter, I think. Um, so how was like being in San Diego and, leaving the East Coast, like culturally and, for your interest and career, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, San Diego was great. It was definitely very different from where I grew up. Uh, and I think, living in a coastal state but not at the beach, you have this ideal of being at the beach. So then you go from it just being like this thing that we strive to accomplish as frequently as we can to like, oh, let me just hop on my bike and I'm just going to go to the beach. Um, so that was nice, and having the nice weather. I think there was a lot about it that I really loved. Um, but I also learned in that time that like that's not really me, uh, and that those things aren't like super important to me. I definitely culturally, it's just a complete like night and day. people are not the same. Like the way you talk to people out west, you can't talk to them like you talk to people out east. Like, they will think you hate them. Uh,
Who
people
will
back
think you?
hmm?
Oh yeah, people back home.
People back home, like it's very straightforward. It's very direct. You just say what you think. Sometimes it's blunt. It just is what it is, and then we all just like move on. I think
Yeah.
out west, it's a little. You need to be like a little bit more subtle with people and a little bit more nuanced, because they'd be like, "What's your problem, dude? Like this is. I don't know why you're being aggressive right now." And you're like, "I'm not being aggressive." Uh,
Yeah, I've seen
so
a little bit of that.
yeah, yeah, I'm definitely very much from the East Coast, but I do appreciate the more laid back nature. Uh, I think there's like a little bit of that that's like a better way to be towards each other. Uh, and I love that about it. I kind of love the freeness and the openness of the West. You know, San Diego is not a very open place, but you go 40 minutes east, it's like a whole different world. You go northeast, it's a whole different world. If you go far enough north, it's just a whole different world. And there's so much to explore. And that kind of like having the love of the outdoors built into my childhood kind of turned into a need to have those wide open spaces. Like
Closer
I
than
don't,
40 minutes away. Yeah.
well, just at all. You know, I
Mm.
not that long ago, I got offered a head brewer job at a farm brewery in Maryland, which is like kind of the perfect gig. They did cider. They wanted to do some wine, things I know how to do, things I've done a good amount. They had like the beer program, which is like the kind of beer that I like to drink, the kind of beers I wanted to make. Uh, but there were some other issues with that job that there was a couple reasons I didn't take it, but one of them was just like not having that open space and that access to the land. Um, you know, it's not anywhere in close here in Colorado. It's not anywhere close to like what it is in Arizona. Uh, Arizona, like, yeah, you want to go over there, like, have at it, man. Like, that's your land. Have fun. Uh, there's a lot more private land here in Colorado, but there's still a lot of access versus Maryland and on the East Coast. Like, a lot of that land is private at this point, and you just don't have the same level of access and the same openness to the land that you do out west. Uh, that's kind of something I learned about myself when I was in San Diego. Just that I wanted to have that access, and it was really important, which was a big part of the move to Arizona. Uh, you know, just having that being in the middle of that, uh, just having that yearning for it.
Yeah. Um, I happen to know this about you, but I think it'd be interesting for folks to know too that, you've taken a lot of road trips to see like a bunch of national parks that are natural, I guess. Um, why don't you share a couple of them, like where you've been and like maybe some of your favorites?
Yeah, sure. So like when I was in college, I did a couple big trips. Um, the first one didn't really get to like get through it. My mom and stepdad's house caught on fire, so I ended up going back to Baltimore to kind of help out with the clean out and spend time with them. Um, during that trip, we kind of went out to Chicago and then
Dang.
up into like the upper Midwest and South Dakota, and then out to the Mountain West from there. We learned that you don't haphazardly go to the Rocky Mountains in May because it is still winter. Uh, Summer does not come until like July. It
Okay.
will snow. It is cold, uh, and you need to be prepared for that. So we ended up getting like, snowed out of Yellowstone. It was like sleeting and raining in Glacier. So we wound up in Calgary and then went to Banff, which was on the other side of the divide. Which is this is how it was explained to me. This on the other side of the continental divide, so the weather's different, but the weather was much nicer in Banff than it was in Wyoming, Montana. So we went to Canada, and that's certainly an area that I think is really neat. The Canadian Rockies, Banff and Jasper are super cool. Uh, It's a real bummer that Jasper just caught on fire and burned down. It's a beautiful place. It's a really special little town. But I think those two parks, and there are like 6 or 7 parks in that corridor of the Rockies in southern Canada. Um, but you'll see mountains on a scale that we just don't have down here. These very wide, sweeping glacial valleys. You see glacial valleys in places like Glacier. You see them in Yosemite, Glacial Valley. But it's not the same scale. It just has this kind of grandeur that I've always thought was really cool. Uh, so that trip, we wound up in Seattle, and then I went home. Uh, the other big one we did, and these were both in college. I was 21 and 23. That one we went south first, learned our lesson. We were out for about 2.5 months. We went as far south as Key West, as far north as Jasper. We did the Appalachians. We went into southern Colorado, moved to Texas, Zion, the Grand Canyon, San Diego, San Francisco, Yosemite. We drove the one all the way from San Clemente up to Washington, with
Okay,
the
yeah.
exception of Crescent City, California, to Florence, Oregon, where we went to Crater Lake, and then up to Eugene, and then back out to the coast. So we did that, went to Olympic, went to Seattle and North Cascades, took a boat over to Victoria, then back to Vancouver, and then went back up and around through the mountains again. I think the Redwoods is a really neat place. It's something that I've always thought was very special. You can see them further south in California, but going up north to Redwood State National Parks, I think it's a conglomeration of the national park and then 2 or 3 state parks. And just kind of to see them in that area and that concentration is something that I thought was really special. Um, I love North Cascades. It's a really beautiful area. And that was when I started to gain an appreciation for the desert. Uh, we had a spontaneous trip to like San Diego one winter break. Ended up going to Joshua Tree, and it was kind of like stemming from there. My like occasional trips to the desert. Me and old roommate of mine, he was going to San Diego for we went to Northeastern. You have to do a year of work experience. So he was doing one of those semesters of work experience at Intuit in San Diego. I was going to go to San Diego because I was in the middle of a rough breakup and I didn't want to be in College Park, Maryland. So I was just going to go hang with my sisters. So we ended up, he was driving. I was like, hey, I was going to go to Joshua Tree. You want to just like do this and we'll go on the way. And that with like the kind of like stopping through on the road trips kind of started this love and appreciation for the desert that's turned into like a full blown, like, that's just where I love to be. When I left San Diego, I thought I was more of a mountain person. And that's why I wanted to go to Prescott. When I left Prescott and came here to Northern Colorado, I realized like I'm much more of a desert person. Like that's kind of what's important as opposed to just the mountains.
And why do you think that is? Why the desert over all of the other various environments that you've like driven to and then like through and lived in?
Uh, the desert, it has this like haunting to it. It's such a harsh place that you think of as lifeless, but it's so full of life. Um, even if you go to Death Valley, like there's little shrubs and stuff everywhere. There's little critters scattering around all over the place. Uh, a lot of our deserts are full of mountains, very high elevation areas. Like in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert, Southwest Texas, there's a little tiny volcanic mountain range in Big Bend National Park, and there's black bears. You don't think of bears being in the middle of the low desert, but they're there, and they found a way to exist. Uh, it's just plus you get like the red rocks and just it's this very stark landscape with a lot of contrast, uh, and beauty that you don't find it other places. You don't see the canyons aren't the same. Like we went up Cedar Canyon here when you came to visit is very different from driving down Oak Creek Canyon from Flagstaff and Sedona. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
just
That's a
very different
beautiful
experience.
drive,
It is.
Flagstaff to Sedona. Yeah, like there's nowhere in the world I've seen that's those red rocks just kind of like oranging and redding and browning the whole way, like through each other. Yeah, I get
Yeah.
that.
So when you
It's a
do that,
beautiful analogy.
yeah, I love like if you go to places where like that's it that are more like this, like a lot of the Navajo Nation driving from Arizona into like Moab, and you just like you can fly over it. You're looking down, you're just like, where's all those canyons? And you're driving through, and you're just like, whoa. It's just like every time you turn around, it's like that rock formation's cool, that rock formation's cool, that rock formation's cool. And then you think about like there's people that like lived here. They made this their home. There's so much history. It's another thing I like loved about living in Arizona. It's the amount of history of our country that you don't typically get taught. You know, there's people here for thousands and thousands of years. You know, it hasn't only been a couple hundred. And the
Yeah,
Southwest is just kind of like littered with evidence of that, which is really cool. I guess littered is a bad word for it. It's covered with evidence.
covered. Litter doesn't have to be a bad thing, I guess.
No, but it has that connotation to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Just not how I meant it.
Got you. I got you. Yeah, I really love that analogy where you said it was like a haunting beauty and somehow there's life here, even though you wouldn't assume it because that's not what people think of with the desert. It's cool. Um, so I guess bringing us to now, Zeke, like what are you up to these days and what are the conditions that you've yet to like create for yourself or want to?
So I kind of spent all of my adult life to now, or to recently, uh, with a sole kind of pursuit, opening a brewery kind of thing. Uh, I moved to California to get into that industry, and I did. I ended up taking some unexpected turns into cider, uh, which kind of opened my eyes to the wider world of it, which was really cool. Uh, then I ended up in Arizona at a job not making beer, making mead and cider and wine, which was again super cool to learn and get into, and kind of reinforce my love for that side of it, my desire to do both pieces. And then I ended up kind of wanting to get into beer uh, for like kind of wanted to be involved in one specific project for one specific reason. Uh, and as I didn't really hear back from the person that I reached out to about that, I realized I just wanted to get back into beer. So I started looking for jobs, and I wound up here in northern Colorado. In just like the worst job I have ever had. Just working with really like, they're not terrible people, but they're not good coworkers. Uh, working with the management team, I was part of middle management, but having an upper management team was really not good at creating a good work environment for anyone but themselves. Uh, Tends to make for a bad work environment. Then there's a whole lot of problems with that. But not this past like this summer, but last summer, this young gentleman smashed into myself and my girlfriend's cars, uh, allegedly on hallucinogens. I don't know. I didn't deal too much with him. But allegedly on hallucinogens, destroying both the cars, which just caused like all sorts of financial issues. Uh, Having to unexpectedly buy a car, not being able to afford like gap coverage, which is really expensive. So having everything left on the loan past the settlement to deal with. I ended up in this situation where I was going to the brewery every day, which I already didn't like, and then coming home and working all night, and then working all day every weekend. So just work every day, all day, every day. I'd wake up at 4, and I would work out, get food ready, go to work, come home, go out and work, get home around 9:30,
Yeah.
go to sleep, wake up every day and do it again. And I hit this point in December last year where I broke, like completely broke, was not having any more. And I hit this point where like I realized I was so focused on doing what I wanted to do, how I thought I needed to do it, that it hadn't occurred to me that maybe there is a different way to do what it is that I wanted to do. And maybe I should try going about it in a different way. I had this thought where like, okay, I've been in this industry for 10 years. I've been a tour guide, a bartender, a brewer, a mead maker, a cider maker, a wine maker. Like I've done all of these things. I'm not actually any closer to starting a brewery and winery than I was my first day at Green Flash, a bajillion years ago. So like, okay, I have no balance in my life. I'm not any closer to my goal that I wanted to get to. And I'm not happy. I'm kind of stuck here in Colorado, like very far away from my child, which I don't really appreciate. And I don't want my life to be like anything like this. And when you look around the industry, like you see a lot of people, not that exact same situation, but you see a lot of people struggling, trying to get by. It's not the best industry to work in. It definitely doesn't pay very well. It's just that reward of like getting to do what it is you love to do. But then when you keep running into this situation where like I'm not even making the things that I want to drink or really want to be a part of, you hit this point where it's like, okay, well, let me like rethink about this. Like, all right, I want to open a brewery. Who opens breweries? People with some time and some money. So like, there's a billion things I could do to get some time and get some money. And then I can open a brewery another time. It's not like I don't know how to do these things. I'm going to continue to do it on a small basis once I get some more time. But it doesn't have to be this way. And so I thought, okay, well, like what's really important to me in my working situation, aside from the balance. And the biggest thing, this is something that like I've always tried to bring to management, which is like not being in this horrible situation where I'm stuck with people who like are not the most capable of really thinking about not them. My last job, my department was the only one in the company that had reviews. And I don't even like to call it a performance review. Like, it's a review. It's a chance for us to sit down and talk about you, how you're doing. Like, not only like how you can improve and what you do well, but like, what do you want here? How can we, what are your goals? What do you want? How can we achieve those? Do you feel valued? Do you feel like you're a valuable part of this and you're needed here? And it was an argument just to get that because they were so convinced that had to be attached to money. And it's like, no, like we're talking about people. We have a team here, and it's important that we try to take care of this team. And unfortunately, that's not the first company I worked at that really pitched itself as being so team-centric and ended up being very much like upper management has a good cushy thing for themselves. And that really doesn't trickle down very well. So I didn't want to be in that situation again, which kind of led me to like, okay, well then I need to work for myself. These situations aside, and the management situations I've been in aside, I think one went pretty well, and the other one was just really not a good fit. Uh, I know I can take care of anyone that comes to work with me at a company that I started. Um, so I kind of like went down this path of like, okay, well, what do I want to do in entrepreneurship? Um, I have a couple little projects going, but the main focus right now is I have a company that does exterior home services. So we do like window cleaning, gutter washing, uh, pressure washing. We're gonna do Christmas lights this year, that kind of stuff. Uh, Another thing, you know me, I like to be outside. So being stuck inside the brewery that I hated all day, every day for 2 years, just over it. Like I just want to go outside, like do something outside. So this kind of seemed like the perfect thing. Uh, I'm capable of taking care of anyone that comes to work for me in this regard. Uh, I can make a good environment in that I can be outside. Uh, I'm in control of the situation as much as one can be. Uh, I can set the tone, I can set the pace. It's hard because it's not like you can do those things. You have to do those things, or they don't happen. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you have to do everything, or it doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, like I find that much more rewarding, and I definitely found myself in a situation where I didn't want to work for anyone else anymore, and I didn't want to do anything that I don't want to do. I have a tendency to enjoy things like pressure washing and manual labor, things like that. I always have. Uh, so I've just kind of been on this journey of creating this company where we can do that with one of my best friends here in Colorado.
Cool. Cool. And it also sounds like it's been a good break away from working within the beer and like um, that industry, at least for somebody else, for the time being, because you already have all the skills that you've learned from there. You can put those to work into this business for now until you can have your own um, brewery yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of like a big part of it. You get burned out doing
Mm.
things you don't want to do every day, working with people you don't really want to work with. Uh, Sometimes you just have to like you don't even realize how far you let yourself go. And then I just had that moment one day where I just woke up. What the fuck? Like we are way, way, way off it right now. So that has been nice to just have that focus, like get back to myself and be able to think more about like what's a healthy routine for me. Um, what is it? And I'm still working on building that. I think we're always working on building that. But to be able to create a life where like that has to be the focus, and then if I can go back into brewing, like that's so built in, like that has to be a part of it. And if it can't be a part of it, then it's not something that I'm going to do. It's just like with our company now, if that's not a part of it, like we're doing too much, we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, or we need some more help. Uh, that just it can't be everything all the time. You have to have that balance. You have to have that healthy perspective, or like nothing about the rest of it is going to work. And a lot of these companies that I've worked for are either gone or in trouble. Uh, and I think a lot of it's just like it's that unhealthy management. It's the idea that like we are all this all the time. We're all very multifaceted individuals. So like take that away from yourself for like one pursuit. Well, ultimately, for me, it just kind of drove me away from it a little bit. But I know a lot of other people that just like it's ruined what they love to do. I'm definitely not the only person that doesn't work with beer anymore. I know a lot of guys that don't care even remotely, like absolutely loved it 10 years ago, want nothing to do with it now. Like that's not me, and I don't ever want that to be me. So it was really necessary to step away.
Yeah, it's a very healthy boundary to draw with yourself.
We're
Um,
learning, we're trying.
yes, yes, always. Um, Well, Zeke, I have just one more question, and it is, what is a like a value or a lesson or a rule that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Let's see. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I would tell people is kind of what I've been talking about. It's like, don't let yourself be so focused on what it is you're trying to achieve that you lose the notion that there might be a different way to do it.
Hmm.
If something's not working, and you need to have the wherewithal to recognize when something's not working. But if something isn't working, you can try it a different way. There's absolutely a different way. There's a different way to do everything. I think we too easily get stuck in the notion that this is how this has to work and this is how I have to do it. That we end up putting ourselves in situations that aren't healthy for us. So I would just say to people, like, try to keep in mind that you need to be able to take a step back and actually evaluate whether or not what you're doing is working for you, and if you could see if you could do it a different way that would be helpful.
Hmm. I'm taking that to heart. I love that. Thanks, Zeke.
Yeah.
Um, and thank you, folks, for listening to this episode of Creating Your Conditions, a work of understanding the conditions we're given, that we're forged from, and the ones we've yet to face. And you can follow us again on Instagram at Creating Your Conditions, which you can also find in the description of this episode. Oh, also, Zeke, is there anywhere you want people to be able to find you or support your services or your drinks?
So our company is called BFY Home Services. You can find us on Instagram at that handle. Uh, there isn't really a whole lot there because I've been doing a billion other things trying to get this business running, but eventually there will be things there. We are on Facebook as well under the same name. If you, for some reason, decide you want to talk to me, my Instagram handle is some dude named Zeke. And I'm always happy to chat with people about whatever.
Cool, cool. All right, I'll put that in, and I'll put that in the description. All right, folks, my name is Vin, and it's been a pleasure of mine to be your host and to interview Zeke. Keep creating, and I'll catch you in the next episode.